Okay. Good morning. My name is Bill Tolan. I'm your EAP manager. And I guess a few of you have seen me up here before, especially that little guy back there, Louie. His name used to be Bob. I don't know what the hell that was. Anyhow, first I'd like to thank a few of the people that make these presentations available. Pat Healy and Steve Brienza, and our ever helpful Lucy Semino, who keeps me out of trouble with the words, and our friends from Aviation Information Systems, Gary Solomon, and Rudy, and Jim Soviero, and Gordon Harper. And I didn't even do too bad with your name today. Right. What's the matter?
Now I'm not angry.
Now he's not. Okay, but we need that later on, Jim.
Bill, my list, you're getting foggy. You're back here.
Okay, yeah. Okay. That was the one. Okay. Now, later on, as the presentation gets rolling, there's going to be a little contest. And the contest will be based on a film clip that we'll be watching, but I'll explain that when we get there. And, you know, whoever gets the most answers correct, you know, according to criteria, will win a prize. There's some prizes over there in the bag, some things you might be able to have fun with. Or if you don't like it, you could always give it to your grandchild. There's a couple, 2 or 3 self-help CDs. I don't want to catch anybody in the hallway afterwards that, you know, that's my Miranda warning, I'm off the hook. Anyhow.
Your grandchild, how do you know what he's saying? We're old, Bill? Come on.
I think you're probably, you know, the next oldest man. Who was that? Who was the guy who had 47 years? He's gone now. John Aroni, right? 47 years or more.
47, that's a kid.
That's a kid, right? We still have a couple older than that, right? Okay, so we're going to begin. And you just take your paperwork, sign in, and sit as you come in. Okay, so now, human emotions vary a great deal, and they depend on a lot of different things. Okay? So as part of the presentation this morning, we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of emotions, and what people believed in the past, and then how that thinking about emotions changed. And people notice probably already in their lives that the way they react to emotion-producing circumstances can change over time, usually in the positive direction, but sometimes in the negative. Okay, so Albert Ellis went back a few years ago, and he went back and he read all the Greek and Roman stuff because he wasn't satisfied with what he was hearing from his peers. And he read a guy named Epictetus, a philosopher, and Epictetus said, what disturbs people's minds is not the events, but their judgment of the events. Okay? Their judgment of the events. Now, this is before we even had psychology. Okay? Yeah. So, thinking about emotions has changed over time. During the 1900s, and then really right up through the 40s and even into the 50s, a lot of people believe that you should feel your feelings no matter what was going on, and that to suppress them was somehow not human, it was kind of stupid, wasn't any good for you, would rot your innards out, and many other theories. Okay, well, over time we came to understand that that's not entirely true, and some other things are true. But I'm not encouraging anybody to suppress their emotions, but it's important what you do with them. Okay? Now, during the 50s and the early 60s, a fellow named Albert Ellis came up with this whole ABCD method. Okay? And what he figured out was, after studying everybody that was out there, he realized that he felt like he could reduce a lot of it to a simple formula kind of thing. A, B, C, D. And that was activating events, cause us to have certain kinds of self-talk, and that
When is
self-talk.
this gonna get interesting? I mean, come on, Bill. Really.
We'll get to you, Bob. Just be quiet back there.
Really, Bill?
All right. Anyhow, I don't want to annoy Bob too much more, but, that it was based on beliefs and core values and the self-talk that generated, and that if we found an effective way to mess with that, we could get less angry if we wanted to, or change the way we felt about a lot of different things. Okay? Now, anybody remember this slide here?
Who's that, the Dalai Lama?
Yeah, that's the Dalai Lama. He's a Buddhist monk. We might even get a visit from him later on with a little luck. Now, some people think that some people get angry all the time, right? And that other people don't get angry at all. Like, when we think of Buddhist monks, right? What do we think? These guys never get angry. They're always sitting there meditating. They're by the hillside and all of that. But can monks get angry? Can priests get angry? What do you think?
Yeah.
They get angry too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're better at hiding it, right?
Yeah.
They get angry in private.
Me
Or if
too.
the collection plate isn't doing too
Me
good.
too, Bill.
Yeah, you get angry
I'm
too?
starting to get angry now.
Oh, all right. Well, you'll get your chance. All right. So then there's some other stereotypical attitudes about anger. Okay? When you go back far enough in time, people thought that women shouldn't get angry. We all know that there were a few that managed to do as well as the fellas. But then in recent years, women have gotten more involved in sports, right? What's going on here? All right. Well, if a person is involved in a vigorous sport that's very demanding and they're exerting, their full effort, and something's going wrong, or just in the course of playing the game, what happens? Sometimes we get really juiced up, right? And then when we get really juiced up, it's easy to kind of get upset and go off on somebody because we're exerting maximum effort. Our adrenaline is running. You're still doing that? Our adrenaline is running, right? And so, at sporting events sometimes, or especially hockey, we see some pretty wild things go down. Okay, well, I couldn't get them here, in person.
You said they were going to be here, but you're lying.
I did. Well, I had to get you here, Bob. All right.
Now you're making me angry.
Stop it. All right. So most people know,
This is only what I
right? That this is all it was, right? Some people know that if you get two people together who have a little bit of a reputation, now maybe George sometimes he's just staring off, but you can see the wheels going inside his head, right? And practically see the smoke coming on it. And you go back for it. Every once in a while you'd see these two guys go at it. And when they went at it, you knew something was happening. And they were actually doing a couple different things. Besides responding to their own self-talk, which was, that stupid idiot. I don't know if I want him managing, which escalated, right? Now when they're doing it together, you got twice the power because you got self-talk that escalates, say, from a 1 to a 7 in 4 or 5 statements. And you got the same thing on the other side. And when you put that together, it adds a whole nother dimension, which makes people even more angry. Now,
You're testing my patience.
thank you. All right, so now we're going to go swing over to the other side of the aisle so we don't be accused of being sexist here. Okay, so now, this is a little bit more personal. Sam comes home from work.
There's a
Okay?
glitch in this whole thing, Bill.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the cemetery rock in your head. Anyhow. Oh, there it goes. Thank you, Rudy. That's good. Steve. I'm sure you've got something to say about that too, Bob, right?
Yeah,
All right, okay.
You know, you
Get
would.
back up there. I can't. By next year, that'll probably be true. Come on back up there. All right. Well, Rudy will figure out how to get that off. But anyhow, what this slide is about is husband comes home from work, right? And his wife says to him, you know, you've been promised me you're going to bring those 3 CDs that you got me for your birthday and then somehow took the work to listen to yourself. You're going to bring them home, and this is the 3rd time I asked you in the last 10 days. You know, what's with that? Oh, honey, I just forgot. You know, I was very busy at work. You know, it just slipped my mind, okay? Well, and then she says to him, I bet you didn't forget those Mets tickets for you and your friend for Friday night. He said, well, no, I didn't forget that. So then she looks at him, because now she's steamed up. So she's going to, you know, get a little more mileage out of it because she's already got him on the ropes, right? So she says, and by the way, you think you could go into the bathroom and clean up a little? Cleaning lady's coming on Friday, and it looks like an agricultural community in there. There's potatoes stock to grow.
Well, that's her job. I mean, really, come on.
Okay. All
You gotta
right.
clean up before the cleaning lady? Come on.
Yeah, what is this about cleaning up before the cleaning lady? Does anybody understand that? That's on the other side of the oven?
That'll work, they get it work.
All right.
Work, you know?
Okay, so, moving right along. Okay.
Oh, we
So now,
all right.
what are emotions? Emotions are signals that tell us to pay attention to something, right? Just like when we have physical pain, if we have it long enough, even for us guys who are very famous for ignoring physical pain until we're practically dead, it's supposed to be telling us that we need to do something about something, right? And emotions are the same way, but we've been well trained in that area too, but we're getting a little better as we get older. So, and emotions are not caused by circumstances, but by what's going on in our heads in relation to those circumstances. And there's a whole array of things going on when we're processing our emotions. We see things, we perceive them, we feel them, and we represent them somehow inside of our heads, maybe with some colors, maybe with some other memories that we hook into them. And one of the more important things is how we evaluate what's going on in our head and what judgments we make about that. Okay? Yeah. When we get to the next slide, I may be starting to get a little primitive myself here. Okay. And so,
We go back and forth, I'm gonna get whiplash here, Bill.
Bob, if you don't stop it, I'm going to make you ride the turtle.
Oh, that's too slow.
We have one in the back.
That might be too fast for my government worker, you know.
Okay, all right, you'll get your turn, buddy. Okay, so when we talk about our more powerful feelings, okay, millions of years ago when the reptiles were kings and we had dinosaurs and all of that other stuff, it was really important for us to be able to get angry fast, be effective with it, be very primitive, and sort of fight our way out of the danger, right, or run away from it. And it wasn't until much later on that these brains of ours really developed a lot. But it's a very interesting thing, the way our neurology works and everything. When we manage to get too emotional, all of a sudden our ability to think isn't so good. In fact, I can remember last week I got angry with someone. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was kind of upstairs on the 2nd floor, all the way in the corner. There was somebody there who had something to do with medical. I didn't quite agree with the person that bounced something. They were trying to get me to do something I didn't think was my job. And after about 10 minutes, I felt the steam coming off my head. And then later on, when I tried to remember what that person said to me, what she wanted me to do. I think I gave it up. Right? What she wanted me to do, I was having trouble recalling it. Because my brain...
You do have a memory, though?
I have a memory and a memory problem, and I got you too. Right?
Remind me
So,
about your memory.
when we get upset and when we get very intensely emotional, there's a tendency for our brains to regress all the way back to our brainstem, almost like being drunk. And we find it very difficult past a certain level of anger to do certain executive functions, some higher level functions. Okay? Now, in the earlier days, we know that, from common sense and going to school and a few other things, that anger has some use, It bolsters us against weakness. It makes us feel strong and not vulnerable because it shuts all that stuff down, right? And it's really kind of easier to be angry and righteous than it is to feel a little out of control or a little vulnerable. And in some senses, it's our basic primitive way of dominating other people under certain circumstances when we need to. Okay? Now,
I gotta sit back for the bill. My glass is getting steamy.
yeah, you better do something here, Bob, because I'm all right. Now, we have many upsetting reactions to certain things, okay? And but sometimes we're surprised, and we could get upset, and if we're shocked, it's even more powerful. Okay, give me a shot now. Thank you.
No, Bill, I've had enough.
What do you mean?
I really have had enough.
Just
I really have
don't
enough.
start with me,
That's
Bob.
enough, Bill.
That you don't start with me.
I had enough, Bill.
What are you doing? What the hell are you doing? Get out of here! Get out of here! All right, I had enough of that here. Let me just, I need a flag or something to throw over him. Anybody got a spare blanket or something? He'll be down for a while now. I hit him pretty hard. All right, let's get back to the presentation here.
I'm just trying to here.
Who the hell are you?
I'm just trying to protect one of my boys here. I see he's down on the
God,
floor
more
here,
trouble.
and this isn't going to hold for me. So there's going to be some problems. He's got a gun.
There's no guns in this building.
Sorry,
no
I couldn't see you, man.
No guns in this building.
Bobby, come with me, man.
All right, guys.
Get out of here.
Taking my bag with me.
Get out of here.
I'll be
Messing up my
back. I'll be
presentation.
back
Yeah,
to
you'll
you.
be back.
I'll
Yeah.
be back to you,
Right.
buddy.
What do you got to do to do a presentation?
See the red yet? You do see
People attacking you in the room. Not everybody reacts like that.
Once and for all.
Never gonna let it down. All right. Okay. Well, I'll try to maintain my cool.
Go back and get him, Lex. Get him, Lex.
No. You got to sit back down. We got somebody else here that's.
Well, wait a minute. I didn't finish the job.
Center of attraction.
Well, I didn't
Sit
finish
down,
the
Bob.
job. All right. You'll hurt me. I'm going to get you for that.
Okay.
You're the bum that messed with my sister. You're the guy that messed with my sister when I was young.
This crap, I'm out of here. I'm getting slightly different to work. Anyway. Well, I guess then when all else fails, I'll just keep this club right up there with me. Not taking any chances after that. All right. Yes, sir. Shelley.
Bill, they announced the Tony nominations this morning.
Yes.
You guys didn't make it.
Oh, come on! We brought an extra pair of glasses today. All right. Well, we tried hard. And
You can finish now.
you got me pretty aggravated.
You got finished now, Bill.
Yeah, I have to get that attitude of surprise, I guess. Huh? All right. So back to Albert Ellis.
You're not lecturing on a hostile work environment.
That was awesome. Yeah. That's it. It's over. Put him in jail. Okay.
I hit you that hard, Bill. Jeez.
Yeah, I was having trouble getting back on track here. You did whack me up pretty good. Okay, so some psychologists later on, 60s and past, began to believe that behavior was all that counted in terms of managing emotions and thinking and cognition and all of that. And they believed that if you could just change the behavior and get people to do the new behavior long enough, that the emotions would change along with it. There was some merit to that, but a lot of people felt it was a little bit too simplistic a model. And, some people would say, well, bad as that thing that they used to think about with the tea kettles and all of that and the hydraulic kind of thing. That anger would build up and up and up and up, and that if you didn't release the valve, like, when they used to send the kids down to the gym with the medicine ball and all that, that if you didn't do something to relieve the pent-up emotion, that at some point someone would explode. And while that was true too, it wasn't the whole story, because what was actually maintaining their anger was the self-talk that they have in their heads and the beliefs that fed that self-talk about the particular kinds of things that were going on in their life. Now, in the next section, did everybody get this little sheet for the contest? Everybody got one of those? No. Okay, there should be some in the back. Okay. See if you can find some more of those in the back and pass them out. Okay, and then in the next little section that we're going to go into, there's probably could be as many as 20 examples of what I'm just about to talk about. The first type, okay, would be examples of people pushing your buttons. Okay? So in other words, as you're watching the clip, you want to write down examples, sort of in some kind of shorthand, self-shorthand, of what particular things were examples of pushing a person's buttons, okay? Or their triggers, or anything that got people going, okay? Then in the other column, okay, I want you to cross off that or excite in the second column. Just cross that off. That was a late editing, okay? And on this side, I want you to put down any examples, even if they don't work out, of techniques that were supposed to be designed to teach you how to manage your anger better. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? Like, there'll be a scene, well, I can't help you without giving it away. So there's less of those than there are the hot trigger, hot buttons. Okay? So you write those down and we collect them later on, and then I announce who wins some of our toys. Okay? So now let's get on to the film clip. Some of you might remember this.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just restarted cruising altitude. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just restarted cruising altitude of 32,000 feet, and we hope you enjoy our in-flight movie.
Miss, how are we doing on that headset?
I'll be right there, sir. Anyway, I got this check.
Excuse me, can I get a headset from you, please?
Do not raise your voice to me, sir.
I'm not raising my voice.
Okay, stay calm.
I am calm, I just want my headset.
Is there a problem, sir?
There's not a problem.
Sir, calm down.
I am calm. What is it with you people?
You people.
I don't mean you people, I mean you people.
Sir, calm down.
I'm calm!
This court hereby orders you to undergo anger management therapy.
Anger management?
From Revolution Studios.
Apparently, Dr. Rydell has a history of unorthodox techniques.
Where should we put my stuff?
What stuff? I don't think you should be moving in with me.
In Europe, it's not considered unusual for 3 or 4 men to share a bed.
That's why I'm proud to be an American. If you fail to strictly adhere to the rules of his program, you will spend the next year in state prison.
Learn to share.
How about a kiss?
I'd love a kiss.
I think she's talking to me, and I think I can handle it.
Keep an open mind. I'm going to assign you an anger ally.
Everyone partnering up, man. Here's my number.
Oh, great. You're gonna die pig.
Oops, that's a letter that I'm writing to Geraldo Rivera.
And embrace your emotions. Temper's the one thing you can't get rid of by losing it.
How's anger management going?
Hitler.
He's insane.
La 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 la. Nicholson, I think it's pivotal for you to confront your childhood nemesis.
The guy's a monk. He's not even allowed to hurt a plant.
You think that's funny?
Don't shove me.
You made me do! Anger management. Wasn't expecting that from a Buddhist kid.
That was out of nowhere.
Okay, so just take a few minutes and write in those two columns, you know, the first column being the triggers or the activating events or whatever they did to make the other person completely crazy to act out in an angry way. And if you remembered, there were a few examples of techniques that people were trying to use. They were pretty quick, so you might miss those. But, well, the only one I can think of right off the top of my head, I'll give it away if I tell you. So just think about it and put about 5 or 6 or 7. And the one who gets the most correct is the one that gets the prize, all right? Now, there's about 4 or 5 prizes, so it's not just one.
The prize is the Live a Year with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah. We're having you nominated for that, Bob. Okay, so back to the regular part of the presentation. Now, Albert Ellis, you know, this is sort of the big build-up again to understanding this ABCD method a little bit better. He was a psychologist, and he read everything that was out there, trying to figure out a better way to handle our emotions, and more specifically, anger. Okay? And so he came up with this rather simple model, but it's very elegant, and it stood the test of time. And his activating event, beliefs and values, self-talk, and disputation. Okay? The D, ABCD. Okay? And the activating event was the thing that someone did or said, or if you were watching TV and you suddenly saw a little clip of something that reminded you of something that happened with your brother or a relative a few years ago. Every time you bump into something like that, you get a flash of anger. And that anger begins to generate some self-talk. And that self-talk, usually for a little bit until you catch yourself, starts to escalate. And if as you're going up to the 5 or 6 level there, and you're just about to go off like a cork, somebody says something to you, and you don't catch it quite right, what happens? They get a little piece of that action, right? They get to feel your pain, because it's not quite what you had in mind, but you know it does cause some trouble. And so the stuff that goes on at that point is in the C. That's the self-talk and the emotional consequences. So it's the statements, the self-statements, our own chatter that's going on in our heads that usually starts at a pretty low level, but can very quickly escalate to a much higher level to the point where we're ready to go off like in the clip. Okay? Now, Albert Ellis also figured out, he said, well, this is no good. You know, people can't go around, you know, being upset all the time. It's not a good thing. So what could we do about that? And he started thinking about it, and he realized that lots of people, a little later on in the day, or certainly by the next day, they've had a number of little discussions with themselves about what they got upset about. And he started to examine those little discussions, and he realized they were doing something very specific. They were actually disputing something about the reason that they were getting angry. They were saying something to themselves like, well, you know, when Mary Ann did that thing, it had nothing to do with me. You know, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I was worse than she was, and, you know, so this whole thing should have never happened, and probably if I had got a better night's sleep, and I wasn't in a grumpy mood to begin with, I wouldn't have went off on her. That could be one. It could be they had a talk with somebody in the hallway, and the person in the hallway said, well, you know, this kind of stuff happens all the time, you know. Why are you getting all upset about it? You know, and he says, well, you come to think of it, yeah, maybe I got a little too excited for the circumstances. I'll try to remember that next time. And so what he does is he encourages people to keep these journals, ABCD journal, and actually record their self-talk and their attempts at disputing that self-talk so that they de-escalate the anger in the situation. And over time, what begins to happen is if they do it seriously enough and with enough vigor, the disputes start to kick in right after the initial triggers. And they start saying to themselves, well, you know, this happened a while ago and I got really crazy with it, you know. I'm not all that hyper today. You know, I've changed my mind about a couple of things about the situation. I talked to Funny Larry over in Flight Standards, and, you know, he gave me a little perspective about it. Now every time this kind of thing happens, that pops up in my head, and, you know, and it's really helped me a lot. So I'm looking for more things like that to add to my repertoire for my disputes, so I won't get angry so much. And over time, if a person does this for 2 or 3 months, they begin to actually get quite good at disputing their irrational self-talk. And believe it or not, this same technique is useful for things like anxiety. It's useful for things like depression and other problems. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's very helpful. It's very practical, and it's not that hard to learn. You just have to be serious and really get it. Okay, so now here's a little situation with an employee, okay? Now, we're not picking on supervisors here. It's just a little bit convenient in this particular case, okay? Now, this is this one guy's self-talk. He says, my supervisor, Ralph, always makes me feel stupid, okay? And then he continues, because of him, others don't like me and don't accept me. So there's a little something extra going on in that one. And then he's talking to himself and he says, you know, I'll be exposed and, you know, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I really have to do everything right. And being exposed makes me angry. So now, well, that's a whole lot of stuff to be going on in a couple of sentences. So then, you know, later on, Ralph is getting a little help with this kind of stuff. And so he's trying to come up with disputes for these lines here. And so one of the first things he learns, he says, well, tell me about Ralph. You know, the therapist says, tell me about Ralph. Well, Ralph is, you know, a little bit off the page, you know. And so he says, well, what would happen if you said in your head, Ralph's mean-spirited and he's, you know, kind of a little off the page, you know? Do you have to get upset every time Ralph, you know, goes a little crazy on you? Do you have to? But I gave him a little something to chew on. The other thing was he was pretty new, this employee. He really didn't know the ropes. He didn't know what the expectations are here. You know, it's a very different place, the FAA. He says, so now the therapist encourages him to think about another thing. Well, I'm a trainee. I'm not expected to do everything right. You know, some of the pressure he was putting on himself came from himself. Having an expectation that he could do everything perfectly. Having an expectation that with very little, you know, training yet, that he could get it all mostly right, maybe even perfect, okay? And so, and then, you know, going to the other one about being liked by everyone, well, maybe his boss was adding something in the mix there, but he was doing a lot of that all by himself. What he was doing was, he was saying, in addition to having to be perfect, everybody has to like me. You know, how realistic is that, right? But his therapist, you know, and him worked with that, and he came to understand that, well, wait a minute, come on. Not everybody's going to like you, right? And if you have a need, a lot of social workers have that need. They make themselves crazy with it, too. You know, they think the whole world's supposed to love them. It takes them years to get out of that one, too. I happen to know a fair amount about that myself. And then, you know, going down to that last bullet, answering the thing about being exposed and he must be perfect and all that. Well, this guy might have some shame issues. Perhaps in his childhood he was shamed by a parent or a teacher or just anybody. It could have been an older brother, right? And so, you know, if he had some shame issues, maybe the perfectionism was a counter thing for him to try to never be criticized. If you're perfect, well, probably get a lot less criticism. But then also the therapist got him to understand that, you know, you don't have to be perfect. You're good enough. And in complex environments like this, it's almost impossible to be perfect because half the time it's changing as it's coming at you. And it really takes a long time for many of us to adjust to the fact that we started out with something 3 weeks ago, and by the time we get to when we're actually doing it, it doesn't, you know, it still resembles it, but it's very different. And it's hard for people to be that flexible. Okay, we have a few more here. Okay, and I'm going to try to keep this moving. All right. Now there's there's a thing called cognitive distortions. And cognitive distortions are when we bring things into our heads, we somehow add something to it, or we go into our own little special process, and that special process affects the outcomes and our emotional response. Okay. So the first one we're going to talk a little bit about is emotional or gut thinking. Anybody help me with that one? We might have seen some of that this morning. Anybody help me with that? Okay, we need a rest from all that jumping around. Okay, well, emotional or gut thinking kind of happens when a person gets really emotionally invested in their feeling about a situation that happened. It's a very interesting phenomenon because it's almost like a magical thinking kind of thing. It's sort of like this, you know, if I feel this strongly about it, if I'm getting so worked up about it, and you know, there's nothing wrong with me, if I feel this strongly about it, it must be true. Otherwise, I wouldn't get so worked up. After all, I'm not crazy, right? But we all have good days and bad days, right? And on a bad day, sometimes we'll get worked up about something we might not ordinarily get worked up about. So, for example, a good example of this type of thinking is jealousy. I once had a guy in clinic who, his girlfriend was a bit of a hottie. She was a nice-looking girl. And they would go to the mall and walk around and go shopping and whatnot. And he was kind of a jealous guy. And he would watch the guys, and he would start to get upset because the guys were looking at his girlfriend, you know, giving her the eye and the whole 9 yards. In fact, a couple of times, he would go up to them and almost pick a fight with them and say, "Hey, what are you doing? You know, this is my girlfriend here. You know, keep your eyes in your pockets. You know, get out of here, or I'm going to give you something to think about." Well, and then on another occasion it happened, and he would actually elevate it to himself. He'd start having an argument with his girlfriend, and he'd say, "You know, you were flirting with these guys." And she says, "I was doing nothing, and the guy was just walking along." He said, "Well, then how come they were, showing so much interest in you?" And she's exasperated when she doesn't know what to do, And he'd also have self-talk going on in his head like, these dirty, no good, blah, 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 blah. And he had himself completely convinced that either she had something going on with a bunch of different guys, or that this emotion that he was feeling so strongly had to mean something. But then after a while, he came to understand that he was just, had a very jealous nature, and he had to really work hard on his cognitions to get himself out of that kind of thinking so he wouldn't be angry all the time, or else his girlfriend was going to probably leave him by the curb. But it's a true case, and the guy did actually learn how to not be angry about everything, or certainly jealousy. Okay, a few more. Okay. Dr. Maxwell Maltby, who's written some very nice books on anger and managing emotions, at one point he was stationed in Japan. And he thought that since he was in Japan, he should maybe think about learning the language, so that he'd be able to go out on the weekends and kind of mix with the locals and have some fun, okay? Well, he goes out to a club one night, and he's talking to he had taken a few lessons maybe a dozen lessons in Japanese, so he knew a few words, and he could say hello, and maybe a little bit of small chit-chat. So he's feeling like he knows what he's doing now, and he goes to the bar, and he's hanging out with there's not that many people there, so he's talking. He thinks he's talking with the waitresses and the bartender, and they're smiling, and they're being nice to him, and everything, so he thinks he had a very successful night in the town. He goes back to the base, and the next day during lunch, he goes for his Japanese lesson, and talks to his instructor, and his instructor says to him, tell me the words they said exactly, if you can remember. And he says, well, it was something like this, it was something like this, and something like this. Well, the Japanese instructor blushes a little bit, his face gets red. He says, well, they weren't exactly talking to you, there was a little something else going on. And he says, well, what was that? And he says, well, they were putting you on, they were making fun of you, So the guy gets in a rage. He is pissed. He is out of his gourd. He starts thinking things like, I should go see the base commander, get him to write a letter to the Chamber of Commerce. They shouldn't treat the GIs like this. This is not good, relations between the base and the troops. And so this is bothering him now. He doesn't know what to do with it. He hasn't had experiences like this before. So he's stumping around the base for a while. He decides he's quitting his Japanese lessons. He's not even going to go into town, right? So he's walking around like this, week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. He's stewing. You know how people do when they get mad about something? They stew, and they keep going over the same crap in their head over and over and over again. And what does it do? What does it do when they do that? Anybody? Keeps it alive, right? Keeps it alive. So you continue to get angry or mad about the same thing. But then after about 6 weeks, he's finally starting to calm down. And he says to himself, I think about it a little bit different. If I was them and they were me, and there was somebody in from out of town, things like this happen. They were just probably joking around a little bit. Maybe it wasn't all that serious. And then, as happens frequently in the military, something that was a disaster begins slowly to turn into a funny story. Now, all a funny story is a pretty elegant way of re-referencing things and creating a dispute-like set of cognitions in your head. So the truth of the matter is, the people who do a lot of funny storytelling are usually also the best at these disputes. And so it's a very handy thing to learn to do. As soon as he starts doing this, now this thing takes on epic proportions in kind of a good way. Instead of being the worst thing that ever happened in his life, now he's starting to look around for other opportunities to create some good stories, because the guys seem to respond very well to this new gift of his, having a good, funny story. Plus, he's not angry anymore, which is a good thing. Okay, so people can learn to not have such hot cognitions, and they can learn to dispute their irrational thinking by any number of methods. So we're going to go over a few more. Okay. All right, so we basically already did the next slide. So we'll just skip past there. Okay. All right. So what are some other things that go on that create strong emotions? Albert Ellis figured something out. He created a whole bunch of charts. And he says, if we keep these charts handy and we work with them for a while, actually what can happen is we can teach ourselves to get less angry about certain things. So he put them in a chart form, and then he started to use them for instruction. Okay. So one of them was magnification. Now, can anybody help me with that? Nearly everybody does that one. That's one that's not so complicated. Anybody? Magnification. Something happens, and we do what?
Blow it out of proportion.
We blow it out of proportion. And what happens to something when we blow it out of proportion? It's much, much bigger than it should ought to be, right? And we can without very little difficulty, especially if we discuss it with someone who likes to get excited about things, right? Instead of going to the person who's funny, who will help us re-reference it, we go to somebody who's very excitable and tends to get all riled up about the same things this person does. So he goes there and he starts talking to me. He says, this happened to me, that happened to me, you know, and I'm really pissed off about it. He said, well, you should be pissed off. He said, in fact, maybe you should do something about it. You know, so what happens then? So now we got a guy who's doing pretty good magnification all by himself. He comes in contact with another person who's also good at magnification, and now we got somebody who's twice as mad as when he started out. Okay. There's another variation of the magnification thing. It's called negative filtering. Anybody have an idea what that might be? Maybe Bob over there, you know, the troublemaker? What about negative filtering, huh?
Make everything look the opposite of what it is.
Well, certainly bad, right? Right? Something might be a close call, could go either way, you know. Maybe it's not that big a deal, but if you always have the negative filter over your head in front of your interpretation and judgment device, it comes out negative. Okay. So, as Albert Ellis was beginning to understand some of these things, he said, you know, besides the A, B, C, and D stuff, there's also something else going on. And he says, you know what? For lack of a better word, I'm going to call that the evaluation. Right? Something happens to us. We're running it around in our head, and then there's a process that happens somewhere in the middle. And he called that the evaluation. And what does the evaluation do? Well, it kind of goes around inside our head, does a little search, right? And then goes down into our bank of beliefs and core values and says, okay, where does this fit in with this stuff? Right? Where does it fit? And then if the search brings something out that has a strong belief connected to it, they say, well, all men should drive big cars. If somebody's been trying to sell him a small car, he's not going to buy it. Well, that's maybe an oversimplification in terms of an example, but essentially that's what happens in the evaluation process in the middle of any decision, whether we're going to get angry, whether we're going to get anxious, even anxiety. There are decisions being made inside your beliefs as part of that evaluation process that there's danger, or that I should be prepared for something that will take a lot of effort, or that maybe I'm not prepared for, and a lot of self-doubting kinds of questions. So in that evaluation section, there's a lot of stuff going on. And that evaluation is interacting with the self-talk, causing it to escalate whatever emotion we're in the middle of. Okay. Now, he also said that if a lot of the action is going on in there, something between there and the beliefs, then if we do something about that evaluation, if we do something about that belief, maybe we don't have to have as strong an emotional reaction. So that's when he got more involved with the disputes. And he said, well, look, if I can come up with a bunch of different disputes, some you can use almost in a canned way, like, well, I didn't like this situation, but I remember a while ago my cousin Vinny, he was in a situation like that. I used to tell a story about it. And here's what he said, blah, 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 blah. And he wasn't that upset about it. He re-referenced it. He thought about it a different way. All right? Another story. Once, when I first moved to Queens, I was a Long Island guy. I don't know from nothing about Queens, right? So I'm taking this class in the city, and I'd only gone a couple of times out of Little Neck. And I thought I was running late for the train, but then later on I remembered that I had my watch a little fast. So I park, I'm a little far away from the train station. I think I hear the train coming, so I'm jogging along, trying to get there, to get across the track, so I get on the other side and catch the train to the city. So I get up to the track, the gate starts going down, and I just managed to kind of get under it in time, and I'm over on the other side. Well, a bunch of other people did the same thing, but right after the train went through and stopped and started, picking people up, a local MTA, transit cop comes over to me and he says, "Come here." Now this is a weird thing, right? Practically on Long Island. He comes over to me, he says, "What are you doing?" I says, "Trying to get on the train." He says, "Well, do you know that you just violated the law there?" And I said, "What?" And he says, "Well, you were jaywalking." I said, "What?" And, I'm trying not to get excited, I'm trying to maintain my cool, but it's not working too good. Because now I'm thinking I'm going to miss the train. So he says, "Come on over here by the squad car." So now I'm feeling a little hot up here on my head, maybe a little sweaty, trying to, be cool. And he actually goes on the radio and he calls up the squad and he says, "You got anything on this guy Toller?" I'm saying, "What the hell is going on here? You got anything on this guy Toller? What am I, public enemy number one?" I'm starting to get upset, And actually I was going to a training on this stuff, which made it even funnier in a weird sort of way, And then he goes, he did everything he could on the radio, and then he goes, and this seemed very odd to me, he goes over to the phone. And he goes on the phone and calls, I don't know, maybe he was calling NICES, the criminal justice information. I don't know what he was doing. But he was trying to, get anything he could on me. And at this point, now I'm starting to get mad. I'm like jumping up and down. I'm starting to have crazy ideas inside my head about what my next move is. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm escalating all that self-talk. And I'm ready to take action because, I'm becoming the caveman, I'm ready to go, right? So he comes back over and I says, "Damn, I'm going to get a hold of myself here. I'm going to do something really stupid here. I'll probably, this is not that big a deal, Bill. This is not that big a deal." Anyhow, so then the guy starts talking to me a little bit, he says, "I'm going to have to write you up, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Oh, that's just terrific." And I wasn't doing too good financially at the time, too, so I'm thinking maybe this is going to be a bigger deal than I thought. Anyhow, I look up over my shoulder, across from the train station, and there's this little old Italian guy sitting there with his demitasse, drinking his little coffee thing, and he's looking over at me. This is his entertainment for the morning. This guy is cracking up. He's having a great time. He's smoking a cigar, watching the morning entertainment, on me. And, and as soon as I saw that, someone could have chosen to get angry about that, but I thought it was pretty funny. I said, "Yeah, this guy's got a pretty good deal. He sits here every day looking at schmucks like me get in trouble, right?" And he's laughing, and that just popped it for me. I'm looking at it from a different viewpoint, a different reference point, right? And so I said, "Well, come to think of it, it is kind of funny. This is like an FBI sting over going through, a train thing, the rail." So I get my composure, and then I start talking myself down. And I say to myself a couple other things. I say, "Well, wait a minute. What's the worst possible thing that could happen here? That's a dispute. What's the worst possible thing that could happen? Well, I guess the worst thing is I could get a $200 fine or something for this." And he says, "Okay, well, that's bad, but it's livable, Nothing will happen in my life if that happens." And then went a little further with it and said, "Well, I wonder how I'll feel about this 3 weeks from now." I said, "Well, I'll probably be telling funny little stories about it because I like to do that. So maybe that wouldn't be so bad." And then I said to myself, "Well, how about 3 hours from now?" well, I'm going to be in that class anyhow. I might as well use this. You know, maybe I can find better ways to not get so upset about it. So anyhow, that's the whole event is over. The guy gives me the ticket. And just to show you that things never turn out the way you expect them to, I end up going to court on this thing. So what do? Well, I'm a good trooper. I know how to play the game. I put on my blue jacket and my airplane tie, and I'm going to stand out from the crowd. I get there, I go to court, and there's a cast of characters to beat the band there. And I get to know a few of them because we're sitting around for a while. And so I'm there for like 2 hours. Nothing happens. So finally I go up to the clerk and I say to the clerk, hey, what's going on here? I've been here forever. He says, what's your name? I said, oh, you're on the list, but your file didn't come over. He says, well, now what do I do? I already missed time from work. What's going on here? He says, just come back next Thursday. By then it'll be over here and, everything will be cool. So I said, all right, at least I don't have to go through any more of this today. I got to go after work, blah, blah, blah. I come back. So now I'm in the court again, same outfit, trying to be good, after the tie. And judge finally gets to me. And he's sitting there, and he's got this quizzical look on his face, and he says, he looks over at the clerk and he says, jaywalking? Jaywalking? Have we ever had anybody in here for jaywalking? I don't know. When was the last time we had somebody in for that? I don't know. So go over to the other court and see what they do. So the clerk walks over to the other court and comes back. And he can't figure it out. So finally the judge decides what he's going to do. And he looks down at me and says, come over here, son. I says, yes, sir. He says, have you ever been in any trouble like this before? I says, no, sir. He says, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you go this time, but if you're ever back here again, I'm going to throw the book at you. So now here it is. Okay, I got in a little bit of trouble. And in the end, nothing happened at all. Except for I got a funny little story to tell. So half the time, the things that we worry about that make us all excited and angry and all of that stuff, by the time we get to the end of the road, it's changed a lot. And it really isn't such a big deal.
Did you catch the train?
Yes, later on. And I did use it in the class. For hours, as a matter of fact. Okay. Now, let's just see. I want to find something. Okay, so now what's some other ways that we can dispute or re-reference? I'm going ahead here. We're moving ahead in time. Okay. What are some other things that we can do to our cognitions that I actually used in the train story? What did I do? What was one of the things I did with time? It's a very useful re-reference. Come on, I know we're all tired, sleepy, want to run around the building, have a smoke. I said, yes, sir.
You ask yourself how you would feel in 3 weeks or 3 months from now.
Okay. And if you don't think that's long enough to calm the cognition down, you can start with 3 years. Because most things in 3 years are going to change quite a bit, right? 3 years. Well, 3 years, half the stuff you're not even going to remember, right? 3 months from now, well, it'll probably be over one way or the other. You'll have dealt with the court or whatever, And even in practical things day to day, in our work. I have a presentation this morning on Tuesday. There's lots of variables. The equipment might not work right. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong, right? But by 4 o'clock this afternoon, it's all over, right? If it didn't work out that well, I'm licking my wounds. I'm getting back, to another place. But I'm not anxious about it, right? I'm not concerned, It's over. We're on to the next place. And I know from history that if you go into the future just a little bit, a couple of weeks, couple of months, it's a very good way to pop out of the immediate emotion that you're in the now. Okay, so that's one. Okay. Now, some other individuals, we're talking about cognitions in general. Some other individuals have developed a very interesting way of creating anger for themselves. They say things to themselves like, you know what? I've had a problem with anger my whole life. And every time I see Joe, I don't know, every time I see him, he says this, and this, and what happens? He pushes my buttons and I go off. So I got to the point now where I sort of expect to get angry when I see Joe, right? So what are our choices? What can we do? Well, obviously we can stop seeing Joe, right? That'll stop us from getting angry with him. Right? Or what else could we do? Instead of anticipating that we're going to get angry, we might plan ahead and try to come up with either some funny things or some diversions or some way to not fall into his usual button-pushing, trigger-causing deal that gets us to have this anger-producing cognitions, and then by the time we get to the fourth or fifth one, we're out of control. Joe starts to do his thing, and we say, "Excuse me, Joe, I got to go to the bathroom." So the bathroom comes back, and he starts in again. Saying, "Excuse me, Joe, I got to go and help my wife in the kitchen for a minute. She told me that around now I have to cut the meat." You know, he goes, yeah. So that's a pattern interruption. Okay. Another way to do it is, throw them off, but do whatever you have to do to keep that chain of escalating cognitions from kicking in and from working. There's lots of different ones, but that's one. Now, another thing, for people who have a tendency towards perfectionism, what's the problem with being a perfectionist? Anybody, come on. Let's just wake up just a little. Only a few more minutes. I'm fast forwarding already.
It's not doable.
What's that? Perfectionism? Being perfect. It's not doable. So what does being a perfectionist tend to create? By definition. Huh?
Anxiety.
A lot of anxiety and something else.
Unrealistic expectations.
Unrealistic expectations, and when we have all of this stuff going on and unrealistic expectations, and we get closer to the deadline, what else tends to happen?
Stress.
We also get what?
Stress.
Get threatened?
Stress.
Threats. We get threats, or everybody. Oh, stress. Okay, stress or threats. Or both, right? And there's a tendency for the people who are in that little work group at that point to start cooking, They're starting to get angry, and they're trying to manage their anger desperately. But, in part, it's because what's driving the boat may be that we have a little bit too much perfectionism in the mix. Now, you can't get rid of it completely, but you can recognize it for what it is, and hopefully you can manage it a little bit better. But I don't think I've seen many situations where there was some serious perfectionism in the mix where there wasn't anger as well. Now that we have another category that's similar, because some perfectionists also have obsessive-compulsive disorder. And obsessive-compulsives, as we know, notice everything. Everything. Right? Nobody around here works with anybody who's obsessive-compulsive, right?
Yes.
We have the lowest obsessive-compulsive rate in the federal government, right?
No.
Right? No? What do you think? We might have the highest, really. I don't know how we manage, but we do well because people who are obsessive-compulsive are very good generally with paperwork, okay? They're attracted towards regulation. They're attracted towards, trying to hold it all together and get it right and get everything lined up. And in the complex world that we live in here, which has what? The last time I counted, I think it was 83 layers, which are all, of course, working in perfect unison. We all know that, right? And you call up this one about that, and they say, "No problem. The training coordinator is in Atlanta. They'll help you out, Bill." When was the last time, well, we'll let that one go. But I think there's a couple people in the audience who've had conversations with me about that. And she's a good gal. And they maybe changed some of her duties. But there's a lot of situations through the reorganization that that are difficult. But in any event, you know, there's a lot of examples of how complex organizations make being a perfectionist and getting everything right almost impossible. Okay, a couple of other cognitions and ideas, and we're coming down a home stretch here, so, you know, don't get too agitated. I'm not doing everything, all right? Irrational idea number one, should and must thinking, okay? Now, what happens if we have ideas in our head that we should do well all of the time, or I must get this done by 11 o'clock today? What happens? Now, those are nice cognitions to get us going, right? Because must is a modal operator of necessity. And so is should, kind of. Must is even a stronger one. And in the German language, we have all kinds of good, strong modal operators, which, you know, make the culture kind of a get-up-and-go culture. But on a day-to-day level, having these kinds of linguistic things driving our boat, can you really cause some agita for us, you know? Let's say you decide that you're pretty good at this stuff and the project you're working on right now should take about a day and a half. And you get in at 6 in the morning, you know, as some of us do, you know, so you're looking at maybe 8 or 9 hours the first day, and about 4 or 5 hours the second day, and, you know, I ought to be able to get it done. So, as I'm getting closer and closer to the deadline, what do? I go to my supervisor or my co-worker, somebody says, I don't know, man, we ain't going to get through this thing. This is not happening, you know. And I'm going to get my head beaten up and down the line. But what do we know from history, even within our own little work group? What do we know? Come on, somebody help me out here. You're not giving away this door. This happens in every group. What happens? Huh? It gets done eventually, but also, as we get closer to the deadline, everybody's starting to realize we're going to have to, like, work something else out here. We're going to have to make a temporary thing. We're going to have to change these must and should modal operators to something else. We're going to have to say, well, we're going to get some of it done by this deadline, and we're going to get some of it done later, and that's just it. Now, once we get to that point in our heads, boom, the stress is gone. Boom, the anxiety is gone. Boom, the anger is gone. Yes, sir?
Are you getting that in the head of the person that asked for it? The person of authority that asked for it?
Well, you got to get them there. You better get them there around the same
You just
time.
can't make that decision unilaterally.
No, you can't. No, you can't. You better be working on it as it's coming at you. But sometimes you can also do a different version, depending on how technical the line is and how critical the data is, right? Sometimes it has to do with data, right?
It's mostly how critical is the need.
And how critical is the need. So sometimes you can get the level changed. Sometimes, not always. Maybe not even often, but sometimes. Okay? And I had a boss at one point, he would say to me, when I first got here, he'd say, Bill, I need some numbers on this, and this. And I came from an organization where we had a lot of little detailed numbers on things, financial stuff and statistics and all of that. And they were mostly real numbers. And I said to him, I said, Frank, I've never done a report like this in 24 hours. He says, well, get used to it, Bill. I said, well, I can't even access the data in that amount of time. He says, well, don't worry about that. What would it be if you had the real numbers? And this was a true story. I said, well, and I would say that it was probably 95% correct, but I was not used to doing business that way. And it made me crazy because I had a little bit of a perfectionist streak in terms of doing that kind of task. Now, there's lots of variability, there's lots of actors involved, but the bottom line is that we need to get a shift going on at multiple levels in order to get to a different place. Now, I'm going to go to a slightly different place that has to do with some other cognitions that also cause us difficulty. All or nothing thinking. Anybody help me with that one? All or nothing thinking. It's either all right or it's no good. It's either all good or it's all bad. Fortunately, most of us don't think that way, but we know people who do, right? Yeah. And you know, it can be very difficult. What's another one? Catastrophic thinking. What's catastrophic thinking? Come on, everybody knows one of them. Come on, help me out here. All right, well, some people minimalize everything, right? And they don't think anything's a big deal, and that can be troubling too, because, you know, we need to get to the end of the train, we need to get the job done. Okay? But some people, immediately when they get an assignment, okay, or there's a change that takes place, they start to do something on a cognitive level called catastrophic thinking. And what do we think that might be? Can we get any help from the legal department here? What is catastrophic thinking?
The worth of disaster, loss of life, serious injury.
Okay. But now taking it down to a more personal level and thinking about accomplishing things that we have been assigned to do. What would be the first type of thoughts that a person like that would have? There's no way I can get this done. Forget about it. It can't be done.
Isn't that negative?
Yes, it is. But people who have a habitual habit of thinking in terms of catastrophe will glom that attitude onto other things as well. You know, whenever something will happen in the world. Let's say somebody has a little bit of a car accident, right? Now, the Rough Riders will be on the phone with their body people, figuring out how, they'll just like push into overdrive and say, "Hey, get a rental car." The rental car arrives at 3 o'clock, and the car's in the body shop because Lex over there came and provided special services and managed to get it in there. And so now it's 4 o'clock. This thing happened at 12:30, and it's almost done. Now, was that catastrophic thinking? No, right? It's kind of like the opposite, right? That person knows how to decatastrophize things, and maybe even go a little too far in the other direction. But if that person was a worrier, okay, or a person who's had maybe more than their share of bad and traumatic experiences, they would have more of a tendency, they would have a predisposition to think in terms of bad things. Well, a couple of years ago, I had problems with the front end on this car. And this accident was on the same side. And the guy in the body shop told me that there might have been a small problem with the frame. Damn it! This car's going to be absolutely no good now. I'm going to have to get a new car. Could be that powerful. Could be that dramatic in terms of their reaction because they have a predisposition to catastrophic thinking. Now, a lot of times we tend to think of it more in a psychological sense where somebody awfulizes things a bit too much, and as a result they worry too much, but it can be at the level we just expressed. Okay. We've hit on a lot of these, so I can skip ahead quite a bit. Okay. And there's a lot of things on the level of belief. I like to think of them as meta beliefs and as core beliefs. Okay? Okay. Now, don't take me literally here. Show me your cognitive flexibility. Things like fairness, justice, equality, democracy must prevail. It's a big blanket statement. And when they don't, I can't stand it, and things seem too unbearable for me, and I can't function. Now that's a bit over-dramatic, but people do slightly watered-down versions of that every day. They say things like, things must be fair. And if they're not fair, I'm out of here. I'll never forgive that person, what they did to me. It wasn't fair. Right? But how many levels are they dealing with? Right? And how many other things were going on? And how honest were you being about the whole situation in terms of the fairness? Maybe you were the only one that could do the job. And maybe it wasn't so unfair. Maybe that's just a glitch you have in your programs. Things aren't always fair. Things aren't always equal. And if we hang on all of that stuff in our day-to-day stuff, we will be crazy all the time. Because the real world isn't fair. Because the real world challenges us constantly to deal with those beliefs. And until we soften them up a bit, until we leave some room for grayness, until we leave some room for other people's foibles, then we will make ourselves crazy as hell, because it's rigid beliefs and strong beliefs that make us the nuttiest. It doesn't mean that we can't have a couple of strong beliefs, believe in the Almighty or whatever, okay? But if we got 20 really strong beliefs about all kinds of things, I can guarantee you these people, whomever they are, should be in clinic. Guarantee you. And the nuttiest people I've ever worked with had about 20. Okay, so it's not coming from, some theoretical place. Anyhow, okay. Now, coming down the home stretch here, we'll have you out of here in about 5 or so minutes, okay? Now, there are other things that happen to us that cause us to get angry at a really ramped up kind of level. And I know a couple of people who've had some of these experiences, so, I consider myself maybe a little bit of a minor expert in at least researching this topic. Betrayal. Betrayal. Big, powerful word, right? Betrayal. Somebody give me a definition of betrayal. That's an easy one. It's regular English. Come on, you can't cop out on this one. Anybody, come on.
Abuse of trust.
What?
Abuse of trust.
Abuse of trust. That's very good. Excellent. Anybody else? He promised me that when what's-his-name retired, that job was mine. How's that, right? Anybody know anything about one of those? Mm-hmm. Now, things change, all right? What's-his-name retires, but somebody else is calling the shots now, not the person who made the promise. Now, you got a person who's been chomping at the bit for 7 years and has convinced themselves that this job was theirs. And so, the job goes to somebody else. And this person stomps around like a what? A wild elephant or a wild boar or something, and no matter how hard they try or not, they can't seem to get this out of their crawl. And when you talk to them, actually, if you want to play with them, you can, but I don't recommend it. You can just bring up the name of the person who kind of was associated with this, and you can get them in a rage in a matter of seconds. Not a good thing to do to a friend. But betrayal is one of the ultimate anger producers. You see it a lot in families when somebody steals the money. People get over that one easily? You don't have to answer that one. We already know the answer. So betrayal is one of the biggest ones. And it's also the biggest challenge for the individual themselves, and if they're getting therapy for it. In fact, if the betrayal is strong enough, and I wouldn't say this for everyone, but in the beginning of a betrayal, one might actually consider some medication, because then it really produces a level of rage and anger and depression that some people just can't quite manage initially. So you might actually need serious medical attention for a while to get past that one. Another one, very interesting one, second cousin. It's like betrayal, it's part of betrayal, okay? Case of a long-term friend, right? They've been your friend for 7, 10 years, kind of count on them, see them all the time. Maybe it's just a work friend, but you know if the chips were down. You've been to the house a few times, but you don't go there quite. But you consider yourselves a good friend with this person, okay? And then all of a sudden, you just don't hear from them. They're still around, but you don't hear from them. Well, they'll nod their head in the hallway or something, but they don't go to lunch with you anymore. They don't leave you phone messages. They don't send you funny emails. And as far as you know, you have no idea what it's about. And you may ask them at some point, but they don't give you a satisfactory answer. And so what are your choices?
Get over it.
Okay, get over it. That's a pretty good suggestion. Okay. But do people do that easily? Do they do it easily?
It also says to approach the person. It says to confront them.
Okay, you can confront them. It's the same sort of thing, yeah.
No answer. I got to get over
You know,
it.
what is it that I did that
Yeah, of
made you
course.
upset? Why, I thought we were friends, if I've done anything, I'm sorry, okay? Right? And sometimes, though, it's still a little hot in the beginning, so what do a lot of people do? They might even do a little detective work, right? To try to find out what's going on. Maybe there's something else going on with the individual. Maybe they're not talking to anybody right now. Maybe they're on some little trip that, they're really hurting right now, and they just kind of forgot about a lot of people for a while. But the feeling that you get there is a very well-developed sense of betrayal. And betrayal is a hard one to work, but anybody who's had any betrayal issues and been burned by that really needs to work it out, even if you have to get help to do it. I know that's a big no-no around here, but a good therapist can get you through that pretty quick. It's sort of like grief work in a way. And I also recommend if a death bothers you for more than 3 or 4 months, that most therapists are well qualified to do that type of grief work. Okay, another thing that happens to people as they get a little older, there's some shifts in the levels of beliefs. Okay? My father, for example, when he was a younger man, he was a racist. He didn't like all kinds of people. And I remember very clearly, at about 50 or 55, his beliefs started to shift a little. And, in the earlier days, I was this liberal kid who would always, challenge him on any number of things. And so when he started going in the other direction, I would say, "Hey, Dad, what's this? What are you doing talking to that guy?" And he'd say, "Oh, that's Jose. He's up the block, We're buddies. He comes and sits on the stoop with me, and we talk all the time, I said, "Well, 10 years ago you wouldn't have done that." He says, "Oh, stop it. People change, Billy." He says, "Well, you really surprised me, Dad. I'm glad, I'm proud for you." And so people shift in their levels of beliefs, and they also develop a sort of kind of a blanket general acceptance of certain things about life. And that acceptance gets down into their core beliefs about things. And so you see people who had all kinds of difficulties in their 20s and 30s, and by the time they get into their mid-50s, it seems like they've mellowed. But what's really happened is they've had so many life experiences to challenge the stupid beliefs that they had, that they've actually changed them. And so they're in a completely different place on a belief level, so they don't get angry about all of these things. And so guess what? This whole disputation thing really works. They just did it over a lifetime instead of in a shorter period of time. And so what we believe, okay, causes us to view things a certain way, okay? And those beliefs, as we said earlier, generate self-talk, okay? And that self-talk escalates the emotion in any number of directions. But now we know that we can dispute those irrational thoughts, those anger-producing cognitions, and as a result of those disputes, if we do them long enough and over a long enough period of time, we actually speed up this change in our beliefs. We don't have to wait until we're almost dead to not be angry about this anymore, not feel bad about that anymore. And we can read some books and do some CDs and that kind of thing and speed up the maturation process and be much happier campers. And that's all I have. Thank you very much for your participation. If you have any questions, please come at me. If you need any resources in this area, please let me know. Thank you very much.